Ah, Jack, 1, 2, yes. New York, just like I pictured it. Skyscrapers and everything.
Good. It'll come through. All right, let me pull out my list of pointed questions.
All right.
One of the things I thought we'd just start off instead of this bio stuff, which we could work, which usually has a way of working itself in as we go along. Maybe John had mentioned that you wanted to talk about something you were doing in terms of working with kids. Is that right?
Yeah, I was just more or less talking about, fans and kids and people that come up and want to talk to you or want tips.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. We didn't really talk about that very much. And that area kind of interests me because I know as I was a kid and everything, every time I met somebody that I really respected or, looked up to, I always wanted to talk to them if I could or find out, one little thing or see what they were like as a person, or what directions they followed as they came up. And what music they listen to and what influences. Because when you listen to a drummer, you can hear influences, different fills they might do or certain things, and you often wonder what they listened to as they went, as they grew up, and what music they played. And I did so many different various musics, right from Latin American as a kid to country and western. My father listened to a lot of country and western, so I had so many influences.
Yeah.
And I still hear a lot of them come out sometimes, even the music we do today.
Did you get to meet any of you guys who were idols when you were a kid?
Really briefly, Buddy Rich.
Yeah.
And I was 13 then, and it was really brief.
Yeah.
Just my dad was kind of a forceful kind of guy, and he really pushed me all through. He always wanted me to play drums. And so when we saw him in Vancouver, the Supper Club, we had front row seats.
Yeah.
And I saw him playing. At the end of the show, he talked to the club manager and asked if I could meet him, but Buddy was in a real rush to split. They were leaving that night.
Yeah.
So I met him real briefly and just shook hands, and he said, "Good luck, kid." Blah blah blah. He gave me a pair of sticks, which was real nice.
Did he really?
Yeah. And away he went. And I thought that was real kind of him because I had heard a lot of things that Buddy was pretty tough.
Yeah. How about local guys or anybody did you have any drum mentors when you were a kid who?
Well, there was a lot of bands. Vancouver scene was real healthy, but it was, as I grew up, there was a lot of the sort of the acid rock and the soul scene, a lot of horn bands and that in mid-'60s and that. And while I was going through school, I just sort of was a lot of drummers I looked up to, got to meet them, but I don't really remember how it affected me. It was just kind of brief.
So if a kid goes to a Loverboy concert, what's the odds on him being able to talk to you or get, to say hi? Or...
Well, the odds are probably kind of slim because of security.
Yeah.
But if there's ever a special request, I always impress on my road manager and our security that if there's any kid that really, makes it kind of special, that they really, they're into drums and they really wanted to talk to me or meet me, I'll go out of my way, to take, if I'm on the run, to take an extra 15 minutes to talk to him or get him a pair of sticks or answer some questions, Because I think it's really important. It's a small bit of time out of my life, which is really big and important to them, and I find that really rewarding.
Do you find same questions being asked in it? Yeah,
well, they want to know what it's like to be touring. A lot of times, when they ask, what it's like to be famous, and then once they break that ice, they say, well, how long have you been drumming, and what kind of music did you listen to when you grew up, And of course, it's going to be different than what they listen to because a lot of the kids weren't even, some of them weren't even alive when you're listening to Otis Redding and,
right.
Temptations. And I listened to a lot of black music when I grew up, Chambers Brothers and stuff like that, And they don't really know about that, and Hendrix and the Cream and a lot of the R&B stuff. But I tell them about that, and I always, I let them know maybe if there's any way they could go out to a record store and go to a specialty shop and try and find some of those records, and learn the pack beat, rather than always the on beat like a lot of the rock music is today, like AC/DC. And, I apply that to our music also, but I also like to emphasize in the snare because I really feel that that's very important to have both schools, the R&B feel and the real straight ahead feel. So I try and impress that with kids, when they come out. And I haven't really done any clinics or anything like that, but possibly in the future when I get a bit more time from touring, which we'll be getting after this tour. We're going to take an extensive break, and I'm hoping to do some clinics and work with some kids and go out and maybe do specialty drum shops around, the States and Canada. And I like to do that. I like to deal with kids, and talk with them.
What do you tell them when they ask you what it's like to be famous?
Well, I don't know. It's all relative, I guess. I don't really look at it as being real famous. I just say, there's a lot of pressures, and there's sacrifices, and you don't get to practice as much, you know, and there's certain things that you have to sacrifice for the success in that, and I try not to run it down.
Yeah. In what areas?
Because it's not a bummer for me, you know. So
no, it shouldn't be.
I always try and inspire them. You know, a lot of kids think, "Geez, it must be really weird to be successful and all this stuff." And you know, the kids always get into, "Well, do you do drugs and do you get high when you play?" And I go, "No." And we talk about that a bit. And I don't know, kids today really are pretty up, and they're really keen. I think a lot of time drummers today come up. There's girls. There's a lot of girl drummers now. You know, it's really blowing my mind.
And they're good.
They'll come up and they're good, and they'll say, "Well, I use this kind of stuff, and I use these heads and these sticks and my technique and stuff," and they're really into it. And a lot of times they can put you on it's like an interview, you know.
Right.
Really, they can put you on a spot and just kind of a lot of really good questions. You know, kids really research.
Yeah.
So, what kind of drum heads did you use on the second album on that one cut?
Yeah.
Did you have them tuned tighter than the other songs in the album? And I'll go, yeah, I did. You know, I mean, kids really look into it, you know, and they really think a lot about it. I really respect it because I don't remember thinking like that when I was their age. Learning songs off albums and then taking another album. I just remember learning feels. I don't remember getting into certain sounds and things, you know.
Yeah.
Although the Beatles albums did blow me away with echo things they did, and snare drums always changed with Ringo. His snare drums always sounded different from track to track.
Yeah.
And that, I remember that always being an impression on me. Kids today really flabbergast me.
And yet it's weird that they'll be that much into the music today, like guys like yourself, but by the same token, they don't. It seems to me there's not a lot of kids that know really the history of rock, you know.
Right.
Like for a kid not to be aware of Cream or Hendrix, I wonder why that is. It doesn't seem that long ago.
Yeah, it isn't that long ago, but I think that the competition and the vastness of music, and I guess a lot of kids really attach themselves to the rock and the glamour of the rock and roll business, and you know the heaviness of it and the energy of it really turns them that way. And I guess they like the big drum sets and a lot of things. I always try and stress. Kids say, "Well, when I get my first set of drums, I want to get a set just like you." Now I have like 8 toms, single kick, snare, blah blah blah, a few cymbals, and I always try and impress that in the beginning not to buy a big set or to get into a big set. You know, I actually rented a snare drum for a long time when I was 10 years old. My dad rented me a snare drum for a month, just learning rudiments and playing in the school band. Now not every kid's going to do that these days. You know, it sounds you'd be kind of straight growing up that way, and I was really involved in school and athletics and everything. But I think that a lot of kids today get distracted by a lot of drums and the double bass drums and the flash and the twirling the sticks, and don't emphasize enough with the groove and being able to lay good time down, and listening to the song, letting the song develop rather than laying down a lot of chops. I think that should come out of time and growing and learning about yourself and learning from other drummers and then slowly piecing your style together. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing to a lot of records, your favorite records, but having variety. Playing some jazz stuff and playing some blues and playing some funk and some heavy rock and maybe trying a country record just for the hell of it, to see what it's like to sit there and play, And I know just from just looking back over my life that that really helped me in versatility, because if Paul, our guitar player, if he wants to write a song and it's got a slight little country feel, or there's a reggae break in the middle, and you're playing a rock and all of a sudden it just breaks away from the rock feel, is straight ahead, 4 on the floor, and it goes into. You want to be able to pull that out. You want to be able to have that, And I think that that's really important for a drummer. He should be the most versatile guy in the band. He should be able to go any which way. And besides being able to go from different bands, if one group doesn't work out and you go into another group, and that doesn't have to be the same flavor, I just feel that that's an important thing with growing up and learning and
you don't think they're doing that anymore? Like, for the most part, kids today, like, just being...
I think they tend to get in ruts, I think, as a majority, and not all of them, really, because there's a lot of kids that are playing fusion, there's a lot of kids that are, playing jazz and doing, like, I went through the marching band thing.
Did you?
Yeah, 5 years through that, and that was a long time, and I learned a lot from that. I really did. A lot of discipline, actually.
Yeah.
And a lot of the rudiments in that. And I played conventional grip, of course, and it took me a long time to switch from conventional to match grip.
Yeah.
I really felt that really helped me a lot, and I still apply that today too with dynamics and using press rolls. I find a lot of rock drummers today can't do a good press roll.
Right.
You know, when I meet them in, say, big concerts and stuff, you know, we'll do, say, you know, a show with Foreigner and Loverboy and Ozzy and Ted Nugent, and, you know, and there's like 5 or 6 or 7 great bands.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a whole day, and drummers always tend to flock together and, you know, get yakking away and working on, you're sitting on a road case, jamming away and, you know, trading off licks, and that's really neat. I find that really inspiring. And each, you know, and there's drummers I look up to, and he shows me something, and I show somebody else something, and I find a lot of drummers don't really have those rudiments, you know. They have a lot of good ideas, but they don't have a lot of, because a lot of drummers didn't really grow up under those conditions, you know, going through marching bands and stuff. But
yeah, but they should still.
not saying everybody has to.
No.
But
I see that even from the magazine, that there's a lot of something about the history of the roots of the instrument or something like that that's missing now, and I can't figure out when that changed, you know, because even if you weren't in a marching band, I was never in a marching band, but I learned the rudiments and I was aware of them and stuff, and there's a lot of kids that bypass all that.
No, not to dwell on that and say that, you know, that every kid should go out and join a marching band, you know, the age of 12 and go through that. But if it does come their way, I think it's really healthy, or the school band or something like that. And because I think with early roots, you know, it's really good for the discipline, it's good for rudiments, it's good for stick control and independence. And I really feel that a lot of drummers today, as you know, as they go on, they're really good drummers and they rock real well. But the independence and that flexibility, I think, is really is kind of lacking in a lot of kids that, you know, come up.
Could you tell, say, like, taking any one of the albums, any of the tracks on the albums, particular spots where a knowledge of rudiments would really shine?
Yeah, Take Me to the Top off the Get Lucky album is one, because it's real slow and just kind of a sexy song, but it's got that light break in the middle, whereas it's just kind of light. It's a little bit jazzy. Live, we do it with a sax break on the album. Dougie happened to be in England, so Paul ended up doing the guitar break for that. You know, we had done it with the sax for like a year, and then we cut the tracks. Dougie flew off after doing the keyboard tracks, went to England for a break, and then we realized we didn't have the sax solo down, right? And do it over the phone long distance, right, and try and mix it in, So that didn't work. So Paul did the guitar break on that, and that's just kind of a light thing. Yeah. It's got a little rim shot thing in it, little light cymbal stuff, and there's some press rolls in the song. And there's a lot of songs like through the records that have had. There was on the first album we had a reggae thing. Yeah. Songs where I've used press rolls and just dynamic little breaks where you lead the band, you know, just like the band leader led, you know, rather than just kind of plowing through the arrangement. And I really find a lot of drummers, what they do is in a lot of groups is they'll start a song and they'll stay at that level through the whole cut. Right. And then, like say live, for instance, then they'll go into the next song in the set and start that song where they left off. And I think that the dynamics through a night should be like the dynamics through a song, and they bring the song back down and let the song grow again, bit by bit, and let the evening build rather than going to one level and just plowing straight through. And I mean, you get caught up in that thing, you know, even myself, you know, you get going in the adrenaline of the evening and the kids and everybody, and you just pyramid, you peak. And that's something that I think kids should be aware of. So anyway, just to kind of tap it off, I like to talk with kids and just stress some of these points, you know. Maybe whether they use it or don't, you know. I think just, you know, expressing it, and that's why I was thinking about doing some clinics and just going out and kind of babbling a bit, you know. Yeah,
that'd be good. If could you tell somebody wanted to go back 15, 20 years, 10 years or whatever, and take the art of rock drumming, okay, from maybe like its roots up till the present day, could you pinpoint key guys who you think are worth a kid listening to, you know, get some foundation to his playing?
Well, there's a couple of. I learned so much off Don Brewer from Grand Funk.
He was in Chicago, by the way.
Oh yeah, God, man, he was so hot. I couldn't believe it. I mean, that band had a lot of dynamics and some great arrangements in their stuff, but really kicked ass. Yep. And I really learned a lot from Don Brewer. And I learned a lot from Stevie Wonder. Stevie had this kind of flow. And not a lot of people realize that Stevie was a great drummer, you know, really. And Stevie really, just talking personally, taught me a lot of cymbal work. He did such great cymbal work. He didn't emphasize so much on the bass drum, but his cymbal and snare and his hi-hat stuff was so great. Like, you'd be going along on the track, and even halfway through a verse pattern, rather than sticking with the stock, okay, verses, hi-hat, snare, kicking, and playing along, and then you get to the chorus, and you go to the bell, or let's say you go to the bridge that's going to go to the chorus, and you're playing on the ride, and you're leading up, and then it's built up a little bit, it's made a change, and then you go to the chorus, and you go to the bell. Stevie would use all three of that within the verse pattern, and then get to the chorus, and then go to the hi-hats, and just stay over there, and then back, and he was like floating all the time. And I really like that sort of spontaneity of being able to just float it, and there'll be a little bell, and back to the bell again, and I think you can apply that to, straight ahead rock or, whatever you're using. And I guess it was that jazzy stuff, and I learned a lot from Stevie and Mike Shreve from Santana, and of course Chicago and Blood, Sweat and Tears. I went through the horn band thing for quite a bit. And I know there's so many, I could go on and on and on.
How about in the heavier drummers?
Well, Moon and Ginger Baker is when I sort of, it all hit me. But it's funny because a lot of the drummers that really affected me were double bass drum drummers. And Mitch Mitchell and Keith.
He was single, right? Mitch primarily. He used for a while double, but in the beginning he used single.
Yeah. When I saw him, he was double.
Was he?
Yeah, in '67.
The Gretsch set? It was a black set of Gretsch he had? Yeah.
And I was just blown away. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
The funny thing was that bill that I saw him in '67 was local band in Vancouver, and then Soft Machine, and then Vanilla Fudge with Carmine, and then Hendrix came on, right?
It probably cost about $5.
Oh, God, it was just berserk. By the time Tim Bogart and Carmen had done their solo, I was just out of my brains, right? And they did this double bass guitar and drum solo, and I was just, and Carmen was so hot that night. And then Hendrix came on, and I was just devastated. I think I was about 13, 14 then or something. I was just blown away. But as a matter of fact, when I saw Ginger Baker, that really made a big change in my life because I saw him with Blind Faith, and Blind Faith was real hot that night. And I saw these pink champagne Ludwigs, and I freaked. And that week, my dad and I went out and got a little loan that I worked at to pay off at about $100 a month or something, and got a pink champagne set of Ludwigs.
Double bass?
No, one.
Okay.
Just 13, 14, 16, and a small little set. I still have that kit, which I've added to and stuff, but they were sitting in the basement with mothballs. That really affected me. But
he was a great drummer, Ginger. I just got to see him with Cream one time,
I like Ginger for his snare drum stuff, and turning the beat around, and playing the one, and the three with the snare. He was so cool with that. That's another neat thing that him and Mitch and Keith were all great for, was their snare drum stuff. A lot of shots and playing. Today, it would be, in today's rock music, a bit too much.
Right.
I've even tried applying it sometimes, and when we're jamming, working on a new song, trying that. And it's like, guys kind of look back and going, it's a little busy, Matt. Yeah, okay, right,
But, that's...
Unless it's a Bo Diddley thing you're jamming on, but,
Great, one of the classic beats of all time.
Yeah, but, Keith and Ginger were great for that.
When you were talking about Stevie, I don't know why, but for the first time last night I noticed it, that whenever you hear, like, the pop tunes that he was doing, especially today, the drummers are playing usually good stuff, but it's very patterned. And it's what you were saying about Stevie, where he was fluid, and he was constantly changing, and yet it worked, and it swung its ass off, It seems like, and then again what you said about playing today's music as compared to the way Keith and all those guys used to play, how it's all of a sudden pared way down for drummers,
Yeah,
and
very stock.
I wonder how much of that has to do with the other players. I've in the last few years heard a lot about, like, guitar players, bass players who, if a drummer gets a little busy, they're lost.
That's true. That is really true. Because we were just we had a group called Quiet Riot out with us.
Yeah.
And drummer and I were talking, and I said to him, I said, "You're a real great player." And he goes, "Oh God." He says, "Oh man, I just love your playing." I go, "What?" He says, "You're so free and you get to play so much." And I said, "Well, I'm kind of restricted, but I got some some places." And he says, I play exactly the same every night." And I go, "Really?" He says, "Exactly." And I said, yeah, I did kind of notice that.
Yeah.
And he says, but if I stray away from it, he says, the guys in the band just look back and they say, no, it's just, this is the way it's done. So some groups have that format, and I don't think it's wrong, but it does put a bit of restraint on the drummer. You think, well, I've got this one break, and here's the song, and there's 4 bars of da do 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 bang, and going along.
And you have to do the same fill and everything.
Exactly, every night he does the exact same fill.
Yeah.
And you think he could vary it a little bit, but he can't, and that bothers him, because it can get pretty mundane, awfully boring, when you're touring that long.
Yeah.
But that's the show, and everybody else can rely on that. I don't like to stray too far away from it, because people relying on certain things, and maybe there's a move the guys are going to do with one thing where you do a lick and there's a shot, and the guy might jump up and do a shot with it, and now the light man's cueing that, and if you don't do it, all of a sudden a couple nights you don't do it, and the light man throws a shot on, and there's the spot comes on for no reason, and you did something totally different. You did some weird floor tom thing, and so you sort of have to. Plus, kids too, like we were saying earlier, really listen to records.
Yeah.
I mean, and they have such great stereos now. I mean, before when I grew up, I had a little mono thing, one of those stupid little flip-up jobs, and they really listen so carefully. They know every lick. I see kids in the front row, and they'll be going along, and they'll do it like air drums.
Right.
And you look down at the guy, and he'll do this one like down bang.
Yeah.
The kid nailed every lick, right? With a little splash halfway down, on the way down, right? Like in It's Your Life has a bunch of stuff, and Lady of the 80s has a lot of drum licks like that. And there's like the whole thing, right from the 6-inch drum right down to the floor tom. The kid nails every lick. So if you don't play that lick, he knows it, right? He listens to the record. When he comes to the show, he wants to hear that lick. And
did you want to do that?
I think about that,
I don't remember ever going to hear like The Who and expecting that Keith Moon was going to do exactly what was on the record.
I don't think he ever played anything the same, Keith.
But you know what I mean?
In today's music, I think kids really take pride into learning something. I mean, you listen to all the hot little guitar players around, man. I mean, there's like 13, 14-year-old kids come up, backstage at the show or something. They got a little pig nose amp with a battery in it and a guitar, and they're just, I mean, they're the hottest little buggers that are just ripping off licks, man, and just go, just deadly.
Yeah, but it's like...
And they're just going, I need a gig, get me a record contract, man, and they're all dressed up with headbands and shit, and they're just wailing away through a little amp.
These kids come to back sometimes?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah, it's just unbelievable. And, they're just ready to go, and they've written songs and stuff, and they've got all of Eddie Van Halen's licks down, and they got all Paul Dean's licks down, and they got all Pete Townsend's licks down, and you just go, they learn, they really listen.
But isn't that like almost like the Japanese in a way, where rather than teaching the kids, like you mentioned about yourself, where you wanted to learn concepts of drummers, and it seems like it'd be better to learn a guy's concept than licks.
I feel, yeah. Well, that's the way I went through it.
So if a kid comes to me and says, hey, man, I've got all Matt Frenette's licks down pat, dig this, it's like, to me, it's like nothing.
Right.
It's neat in a way, but so what? Where's you? That,
But then if you get that melting pot of, okay, Matt Frenette's licks and Stevie Wonder's licks and certain people, as you grow and you keep playing, I think it'll come along, and sooner or later that light will click on.
Yeah.
When Billy Cobham hit, I remember having the first album, this guitar player friend of mine turned me on to an album called Dreams. Billy's first.
Oh, okay, with the band? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the 2 Dreams, I was just blown away. I was like, God, when he did the song New York with the drum solo, I mean, this thing just came out of nowhere for me, and I went, good God. And I got into Cobham so thickly, and I still play his type of fills, and cross it, right? Still try and play his type of fills with a cross of like Charlie Watts, and then today's 4 and a floor beat, with the rock and roll scene. I think that I always found this thing with a cross between Charlie and Billy.
It's quite a blend.
And there was like staying loose and grooving,
Yeah.
but having that demand of being able to pull off a real heavy fill, and that intensity, that kind of energy, and then things just started honing in.
Yeah.
And then when we started playing original material, and started that in 75, when Paul Dean and I got in a band together, and I stopped playing cover stuff, I started realizing that in the material that we were doing, I was using that kind of energy and having something that was kind of funky and groovy And then also being able to, once the high energy stuff, play the fast fills. And so that's kind of where I ended up falling into.
Yeah.
And I feel I've sort of gone into that area.
Yeah.
And stayed there. Always trying to keep that backbeat. You know, keep the R&B feel. Yeah.
There's a lot of kids now look at Charlie Watts and like,
what does he got to
big
offer?
deal.
Yeah, right.
Christ, the guy's
I like
got
Charlie's
4
playing.
drums.
Yeah.
Well, how good can he be, you know? What was the motivation for starting the Loverboy originally, when you guys all got together?
Well, Paul Dean and Mike actually started the journey of the band. And I was still playing in another group that Paul and I were in prior to the Loverboy thing. So we played in a group for a couple of years, and then I stayed in for an extra year. And through that year, after Paul left, he met Michael in Calgary, and they started writing and just getting off on each other. They really found it was a good writing team, and they just stayed in Calgary for about a year and a half, and wrote a hell of a lot of songs, and worked on a concept, on an image thing, and started just honing down, you know, a lot of ideas. And met Lou Blair, one of our managers, and then went to Vancouver, and they had a couple of little demos with some other players that were around, and they met Dougie, keyboard player. And so there was just the 3 of them, but there wasn't really the whole band, and they went out and they did some demos with different drummers and stuff and different bass players. And then met Bruce Allen, our other manager, and shot the demos. And then I quit the group I was previously in and went to Vancouver just to get a break.
You didn't know that all this was going on?
I heard through the grapevine that Paul was putting another group together, but I didn't quit to join that. I quit because I just wanted to just shut it down for a while and try and just, you know, collect my thoughts. And maybe I was just going to kind of float around, do a couple of different little things, and I just sort of sat around and practiced in the basement for a while. I got real bored. Couldn't do it. I had to play with other people. I couldn't sit down, put the headphones on, and do what we've just been talking about anymore. Because of making albums and touring and stuff and playing with other musicians, I needed that outlet of, you know, give and take, putting a song together and, you know, pulling back in the guitar solo and all this kind of stuff. I couldn't sit there and play to the records anymore. You know, it was really tough sitting there, you know. And so I got real frustrated, and the phone rang one day, and it was Mike. And he said, "What are you doing? We hear you're in town." I said, "I'm just kind of pissing around." And he said, "Well, would you like to come down and jam?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be great." And Paul and I had a hard time talking because of the split in the band that happened before the Loverboy thing. So him and I, after being real close, had some ice to break, you know. And so when we finally saw each other, you know, we straightened everything out. So it took a little while to get in the groove, and it was a different concept than what Paul and I had done in 2 other groups we played together in. And he had all the songs already written, and the concept of the group and the image type thing, it was going to be a little more poppier and a little more commercial than what we had done. And it was, at first I thought, this wouldn't be right for me. I don't know if I want to go that route. Then after I got into the songs more and played more with them, I felt that I could still play the way I liked. And the songs were more commercial or more accessible to the public, I felt. And it was more sellable too. And the record company there was a lot of talk going on. And I had to take a real serious look at it and go, yeah, this really feels good. And so we rehearsed, and then we did the clubs for like 8 months.
Long time, yeah.
Yeah, 6-8 months, and then boom, the record contract came through, Canadian contract with CBS Records, and the management was real strong, and the band felt great, and we were doing all original material in the clubs. We didn't do any cover. We did 3 50-minute sets of all original material, and we were packing the joints. And so then we knew that there was something here that the public liked, and they knew they could dance to it, and they could get off on the vocals, they could get off on the energy, and we're getting real good reviews, and we were getting better money in the clubs week by week, and so we knew that something was good there, but how big it would actually get, we weren't sure. And I remember signing the contract on the way in to do the first. It was so weird. We said, well, we're gonna do an album. Okay, let's do an album. And we didn't have a contract, so we went in the studio. We're gonna foot our own bill and shop a demo, because then you can't just put a little 8-track demo together and go and shop that. The record company said, we want to hear something finished.
Right.
We want to hear the real thing. So let's go in the studio and do our $65,000 album or whatever it's going to cost us, and shop that. So as we were going in, CBS Records came through and said, yep, here's your advance and blah, blah, blah. So the drums were going in, and so was the contract. We signed the same day we started in and doing drum check. But
Did you have a lawyer with you when you did it?
Yeah, we had people around. Yeah,
good.
and it was cool. We ended up rewriting the thing, I think, about 4 or 5 times before the final one actually ever.
A lot of horror stories about guys, signing and then coming around and whoops.
Yeah, right. Down the tubes for 6 years.
How we doing on tape? Well, still a little good. How much did the managers help you guys? Did they help get the band smooth out, like rough edges around the band?
Yeah, Bruce and Lou are really, really hot management. Bruce had a lot of experience because of he managed BTO all through their fame and climb, and through the early '70s, and he knows a lot of people, a lot of contacts. So we got out on a really good tour. Right off the bat, we were out with Cheap Trick. The first show we ever did was Warming Up Kiss in our hometown.
Is that right?
Sold out, man, and it was really rough. People booing us and all this shit. And
did they? Yeah.
Well, it was a real young crowd, and we went up and took our lumps and everything, and got through the set, and then went out and played. We warmed up some Canadian. We went on a tour with Prism, one of Bruce's groups, and then went out with Cheap Trick, did a Western Canadian tour, and started getting our legs for playing live, in the concert situation, and seeing how our tunes went over with the kids rather than the bars, where kids are, people are drinking and it's older, right? To see how our music would go with the younger generations, and it was going not too bad, we learned from him, chop this, and that song sucked, okay, throw it out. And,
did you?
Yeah, and did that kind of thing, and then got in Bruce's contacts after knowing some, great promoters in the States and everything. Got us happening with Kansas. We went out with Kansas for 3 months in the States, and we worked real hard in '81. We did like close to 200 shows.
Did you really?
Yeah, and we really felt, that year really helped break the band, along with Turn Me Loose and that.
I remember that, because you just on the East Coast, you started hearing about Loverboy sort of in the West Coast.
Yeah. And there was little smatterings, and the shows that we weren't doing at the concerts, we would go out to clubs and headline a 1,000-seater club, or pop into all these little clubs in Albany, New York. And then 3 nights later, we would be on tour for 3 or 4 shows with Kansas or ZZ. And then,
weird, huh?
And then, so there was no time off, man. We just worked and worked and worked. And that was great. It was Kansas, and then April Wine, and then ZZ Top. And then Journey. And by the end of '81, we had played to every kind of demographic there was to play in the USA. Every, the Kansas college crowd, ZZ Top, really heavy rockers, more male demographic, And then Journey, which was, more of the kids that like Loverboy.
Yeah.
And so it was.
So they can chart that by what? Ticket sales in a concert, or how do they know who's listening to a band?
Well, you can tell just when you go to the show. You can tell
check out
the kind of the kind of kids that come out, and check out the show rather than being bottle throwers, And it's real. I had a few of those.
Did you get hit by bottles sometimes?
Top tour, yeah. My drums took a shit kicking, man.
You kidding? Yeah.
Yeah.
Texas folks,
Well, no, Texas Jesus good. It was a couple of areas that were just kind of rough, where they really wanted ZZ Top, and Loverboy was still in the breaking stage, and they just looked at these leather-clad rockers running around stage, and they just didn't want anything to do with it,
Yeah.
And they wanted the Southern Boogie happening, and right now, get the fuck off the stage, So.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, there was one of those nights, yeah.
Fuck you! Get up!
Yeah, that's the worst gig ever played, Cape Cod.
Is that where it was? Cape Cod?
Cape Cod.
That's weird.
Bottle right off the stage. They just chanted through our whole set. ZZ Top, ZZ. We're playing, the kid is hot tonight. We're going along and we're looking at each other and just like going, oh God, stand up like a man. Fight these guys, Finally, we ended one song, and it's just like, okay, we should just leave the stage, So Paul just went up to the mic and said, because Michael was getting pelted. So Michael walked off to the side, and Paul just said something to the effect, well, it's obvious what's going on here. I think that maybe we should, and they're all, get off the stage. So we said, we're taking off,
Thanks.
We tried, thanks, but no thanks, and we split. And
have you been back since Cape Cod?
Oh yeah, headline, jam the joint.
That's great, right?
Yeah. So.
What'd you do after the show? Like keep yourselves.
We went back. Down? We seriously took a look at everything, man.
Did you?
We all sat in the dressing room looking at our shoes. Just kind of nobody said anything, right? And management came in and said, "Look, shake it off, no problem. Don't worry about it. It was just a rough night. One of those nights. It was all guys, a lot of bikers, you know, and it was, you know, oh man, this one Jack Daniels bottle must have come from way the back of the room. And if it would have been about another 6 inches higher, it would have hit me square in the face, and it would have been good night, Irene, right?
Yeah.
But it nailed my 13-inch tom, and I still have the gouge in it, and it just goes like there's this big, huge gouge in the outer 2 layers, and it just slides right down, and there was glass everywhere and Jack everywhere. So they really didn't want anything to do with it. So it took us about a week to actually, it really, really toughened up the band.
Mm-hmm.
It really did. We really took a good look at some of the songs that maybe were weak in the set, where the crowd was like kind of going, or they got restless. You could remember from the set what songs you had their attention in and what songs you didn't. Mm-hmm. So we took a look at that. And when we went into the Get Lucky album, we wrote songs like Gangs in the Street. Mm-hmm. And so we toughened up. We really did. We narrowed a lot of the first album. There was at least 3 or 4 directions on that album. Like I said, some reggae things, some funk things, some close to disco rock type things. Right. Those were gone. History. Mm-hmm. And we narrowed it down to like 2. You know, the rock and the pop with some keyboard. I won't say wave. I hate trying to title things, but poppy with the wave flavor.
Contemporary.
Yeah. And we narrowed it down to at least a couple directions, and that was solely due after the ZZ Top tour, because it really toughened the band up, and it was great. Learned a lot.